Neuroscience has given us remarkable insights into the way our brains respond to the world. But what is even more fascinating is how closely these discoveries align with practices that humanity has embraced for centuries in the name of spirituality. For generations, people have prayed, meditated, chanted, or simply sat in silence, not fully understanding why these rituals brought them peace, but trusting that they did. Today, brain scans and neurological studies reveal that these very practices create measurable changes in the brain. They quiet the amygdala, the part of the brain that governs fear and threat detection, while strengthening areas related to compassion, focus, and emotional regulation. What spirituality intuited through tradition and wisdom, science now confirms through data and research. The two are not at odds, rather, they illuminate the same truth from different directions. When a monk enters deep meditation or when an ordinary person pauses for mindful breathing, neurons begin firing in new patterns. Stress hormones like cortisol decrease, and neurotransmitters such as serotonin and dopamine find balance. This is not a mystical accident. It is the body's natural design. Spiritual practices are not just cultural or religious artifacts. They are biological regulators that restore equilibrium to the nervous system. Neuroscience allows us to see what has always been happening invisibly, that stillness and surrender are not acts of withdrawal but of profound healing. What makes this link so powerful is that it strips away the illusion that spirituality is only about faith or belief. You do not have to subscribe to a particular religion to experience its benefits. Gratitude journals, mindful walking, chanting, or even intentional silence activate the same neural pathways that ancient spiritual practices were designed to nurture. The brain does not ask whether you are Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, or atheist. It only responds to the state you cultivate. Science validates spirituality by proving that these practices change the architecture of the brain. At the same time, spirituality gives science something it cannot manufacture on its own: meaning. A brain scan may show reduced activity in the stress centers during meditation, but it cannot explain the profound sense of belonging one feels in prayer, or the awe experienced while gazing at the stars. This is where spirituality offers the missing layer. It says, you are not just neurons firing, you are part of something larger. The combination of these two perspectives creates a more complete picture. Science grounds spirituality, and spirituality gives science soul. When we embrace both, we begin to understand happiness in a new way. It is not merely a temporary spike of pleasure or the avoidance of pain. Happiness emerges from a deep harmony between body, brain, and spirit. Neuroscience proves that our spiritual instincts are not illusions. They are integral to our well-being. And spirituality shows us that the scientific data points towards something timeless: the human need for connection, transcendence, and peace. Together, they form a bridge between the tangible and the invisible, revealing that the search for happiness is not either science or spirit, but the beautiful conversation between the two. Happiness is one of the most misunderstood pursuits in human life. We often confuse it with pleasure, with the quick hits of dopamine that come from buying something new, receiving a like on social media, or achieving a goal we've been chasing. While these moments feel good, neuroscience reveals that they are short-lived surges, temporary bursts of chemical reward that fade quickly, leaving us searching for the next fix. True happiness, however, is not built on the endless cycle of chasing dopamine. It is built on connection. Connection to others, to ourselves, and to something larger than us. When we understand this difference, we begin to see why so many people who have it all, on paper, still feel unfulfilled. The brain is wired for connection. When we share a deep conversation with a loved one, hug a friend, or feel seen and understood, our nervous system relaxes. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, floods the body, creating a sense of safety and belonging. This is not a fleeting high. It is a stabilizing force that strengthens emotional resilience. In contrast, when we are isolated or constantly comparing ourselves to others online, the brain registers threat and loneliness, increasing stress hormones like cortisol. Over time, this undermines mental health and erodes our capacity to feel joy. Neuroscience shows us that our greatest source of lasting happiness comes not from what we accumulate, but from the relationships we nurture. Spiritual traditions have always emphasized this truth. Whether it is in the form of community rituals, acts of service, or practices of compassion, spirituality has long taught that fulfillment comes from giving, sharing, and belonging. Gratitude is a perfect example. When we take time to consciously appreciate someone or something in our lives, studies show that our brains begin to rewire, building stronger neural pathways associated with optimism and well-being. Gratitude interrupts the cycle of dissatisfaction by shifting focus from what is missing to what is present. Spirituality frames this as a way of honoring life, while neuroscience explains it as the brain's ability to strengthen positive circuits through repetition. This is why connection is medicine. It not only heals emotional wounds, but literally changes the structure of the brain. Practices like empathy, forgiveness, or simply being present with another person are not abstract ideals. They are actions that calm the nervous system, build resilience, and expand happiness. What both science and spirituality affirm is that happiness is relational. It cannot be hoarded or consumed in isolation. It must be shared, experienced, and lived in connection with others. When we shift our focus from the pursuit of individual achievement to the cultivation of deep bonds, happiness stops being something we chase and becomes something we embody. We stop looking outside for validation and begin to feel the quiet contentment that comes from being connected to people, to meaning, and to the present moment. Neuroscience provides the data, spirituality provides the wisdom, and together they remind us that connection is not just important. It is the foundation of true happiness. When we look at science and spirituality separately, each seems to offer only part of the story. Neuroscience shows us how the brain works: neurons firing, synapses forming, chemicals releasing. It explains why we feel stress, how memory is stored, and what happens when we practice gratitude or meditation. But science often stops at the mechanics. It cannot fully capture the meaning behind our experiences. Spirituality, on the other hand, gives us language for awe, purpose, and transcendence. It reminds us that life is more than survival, that there is beauty in surrender, and that fulfillment often comes from something larger than ourselves. When these two perspectives are combined, they create a powerful dance between the tangible and the intangible, giving us a deeper and more sustainable form of happiness. Neuroscience has discovered that practices rooted in spirituality, such as prayer, mindfulness, or chanting, not only calm the nervous system, but also reshape the brain itself. Neural plasticity, the brain's ability to change and form new connections, shows us that our inner life is not fixed. Every time we engage in a spiritual practice, we are sculpting our brains to be more resilient, more compassionate, and more balanced. This is the science of transformation, revealing that the spirit's search for meaning has a direct and measurable impact on the body and mind. At the same time, spirituality saves us from reducing life to mere biology. It reminds us that happiness is not only the absence of stress or the presence of certain chemicals, but also the presence of wonder, love, and purpose. Neuroscience may tell us that dopamine rises when we laugh with a friend, but spirituality tells us that laughter is sacred, a reminder of the joy of being alive. Together, these views show that we do not need to choose between science and spirit. The brain is not a machine without soul, and the spirit is not a dream without grounding. They complement and complete one another. The dance between brain and spirit teaches us that happiness is not something to chase outside ourselves, but something to cultivate within. It emerges when our biology supports our sense of meaning, and when our sense of meaning in turn shapes our biology. This is why meditation, gratitude, awe, and love are so powerful. They are not only soothing rituals, but also neurological training, preparing the brain to experience life with openness and peace. They remind us that joy is not an accident, but a practice, one that bridges science and spirit every single day. When science and spirituality meet, happiness stops being fragile. It no longer depends on fleeting highs or external conditions. Instead, it becomes a steady rhythm, the harmony of neurons and soul working together. This dance is what makes us fully alive, grounded in reality yet lifted by wonder, rooted in knowledge yet expanded by mystery. And in this union, we discover a form of happiness that is not only lasting but profoundly human.